I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington, and this week on Face the Nation, 2 American troops are dead and 1 missing after an Iranian missile hit. The U.S. military has launched retaliatory strikes. 8 consecutive nights of American bombing marks a return to U.S. combat in the Mideast. We'll have the latest with Senate Intelligence Committee Vice Chair Mark Warner. The exchange of fire comes amid a turbulent week at home, with the president facing questions on everything from immigration enforcement to tariff threats against Canada. Yet in a fiery primetime address last week, he chose to focus on election security and his 2020 loss.
I'm announcing the immediate declassification and release of critical intelligence, revealing shocking vulnerabilities in our election infrastructure.
A decision some members of his own party are now questioning.
I don't understand talking about what happened 6 years ago in light of these upcoming elections.
We'll examine the president's claims with CBS News election law contributor David Becker and former cybersecurity chief Chris Krebs, who was fired by Trump for asserting that the 2020 elections were secure. Plus, New York Governor Kathy Hochul on her state's new data center moratorium, and White House border czar Tom Homan on growing scrutiny of ICE operations. And finally, is inflation cooling? We'll ask Bank of America's CEO Brian Moynihan whether Americans can expect relief on affordability. It is all just ahead on Face the Nation. Good morning and welcome back to Face the Nation. America is back at war. There were new exchanges of fire this morning with Iran launching missiles at U.S. partners in Jordan, with Israel warning that could spill into their territory and widen the conflict. Overnight, the U.S. targeted Iranian drone and missile sites after Iran's Revolutionary Guard killed 2 American service members and injured others. 1 service member is still missing from that attack. These are the first deaths of U.S. troops since the fighting resumed 2 weeks ago. To date, 16 American troops have died in this conflict with Iran. For more now, we begin with the Vice Chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Democrat Mark Warner of Virginia. Senator, good morning to you. You are part of the very small group of people on Capitol Hill who are supposed to have sensitive information shared with them. Since this was the second hit in about 2 days on a base where Americans are in Jordan, do you have any insight into why they were able to penetrate those American defenses?
Well, first of all, condolences to the service members' families. And it's remarkable in many ways that we've not had more casualties. We literally have had hundreds of seriously wounded, but I think we're at 16 fatalities. I would argue, Margaret, this is what happens when you start a war of choice. And as a member of the Gang of 8, I can say unequivocally there was no imminent threat from Iran. Mm-hmm. You start a war of choice without a plan. And very briefly, if you go through what the administration finally said their goals were, regime change, well, the guys in charge now are worse than the prior crowd. Getting the enriched uranium, no progress on that. It'll take 15,000 troops on the ground. Nobody wants to do that.
15,000.
15,000 been the minimum assumption you'd need to go into these bunkers, take out this enriched uranium in canisters would be very difficult. The Iranians would be shooting at them. Nobody has been moving on that. We said we were going to degrade their ability to use missiles and drones. Obviously, we've not been successful on that point. It gets me particularly crazy because we're using missiles that cost $2.5 million to shoot down Iranian drones that cost $50,000. Mm-hmm. And the country that has figured out how to do this cheaply, efficiently is Ukraine. They can take out Iranian drones with $5,000 drones, and we turn down their offer of their technology. And then finally, the Strait of Hormuz, gas is now back up to $4. That's $1.20 more than it was, at least in Virginia when the war started. And there is no plan on how we keep the strait open.
Well, the president said he might look at that drone deal. You're right, it hasn't been followed through on yet. But just to put a fine point on it, back in May, the U.S. sanctioned Chinese entities for helping Iran's military secure weapons and satellite imagery. Does this direct hit signal to you they are getting targeting help from our adversaries?
I have not been briefed on whether they're getting targeting help. I do know that these bases have been on and off under attack since the beginning 5 months ago of, again, this war of choice.
Okay. I want to move to another topic, and that is the Director of National Intelligence. Jay Clayton, who is currently the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, seemed unaware under questioning this week that Tulsi Gabbard had been searching an election center down in Georgia, the state of Georgia, something that she does not have the legal mandate to do. The president has also tasked Bill Pulte, the acting DNI, to dig up information on 2020. You pressed Jay Clayton on who won the 2020 election, and he said Joe Biden was certified as president. Is that sufficient for you? Do you intend to vote him out of committee? How quickly will this happen?
I've known Jay for a long time. I like Jay. I worked well with him when he was at the SEC, but I was bitterly disappointed by his performance in front of my committee, not just from my questions, but from many of my colleagues, or him even kind of acting like he didn't understand what Gabbard had done in Fulton County. So I will be voting against Jay Clayton.
So he won't advance out of committee?
He will advance out as long as all the Republicans vote for him. He will advance out. And then we're a little rock and a hard place here. I know Jay Clayton will probably get confirmed. I hope we see the Jay Clayton that I've known and have worked with. The one thing I also know is the absolute disaster we have right now with the acting DNI, Bill Pulte, who has no intelligence experience, who has nothing but loyalty to Trump, and frankly, a past history when he was head of the Fannie and Freddie of taking private mortgage information and politically weaponizing that. That is not the kind of person we want in as DNI.
Right. So you want a quick replacement, but you're not going to vote for his replacement, though you think he's got the Republican votes to actually get the job soon?
I hope so.
You hope so. The president, as you know, declassified intelligence this past week. He argues there's vulnerabilities in infrastructure. It has been public for years that the intelligence community assessed China tried to influence the U.S. election, basically change what people think, not necessarily hack their ballots, so to speak. Listen to what he said here, though.
This evidence shows that the election system we have dangerously exposes and really exposes like levels never thought possible to hacking, exploitation, and foreign interference.
Has your committee been given evidence to back up those claims that suggest a direct ability to interfere?
No, absolutely not. And matter of fact, there are so many absurdities and falsehoods in Trump's Thursday night speech, and I'm glad that most media treated it not as serious news. And I know some folks at your network, the journalists I have huge respect for. I was disappointed that your senior management made the decision to cover it as news. There's so many falsehoods. Where do you begin? The only election that Trump is concerned about is 2020. That was the election that his administration was in charge of.
Right.
Matter of fact, the director of national intelligence, Mr. Radcliffe, it was DNI then. He's CIA director now.
Right.
If there was mistakes made, why is he CIA director? He goes through this focus on China when he forgets or just omits the biggest country that tries to influence on every election is Russia. We've documented that time and again. And the complete conclusion of the intelligence community, 18 different agencies said, yes, folks tried to influence, didn't mean they changed any vote, and they sure didn't interfere in the machinery. Now, when he talks about getting all of these voter files, you can buy those. They're commercially available. What we should be more concerned about is the fact that China hacked into the OPM, which gives the background on all federal employees, or when they hacked into some of our insurance companies and it's got personal information on each of us. But the idea that they, and I would bet you a dozen other countries, have bought up voter files. Lord knows in politics, you don't run in a state like mine. I have to buy the voter file to figure out who to contact as my last
No, and
voters.
some of my colleagues here have obtained them. You went on websites and showed you can do that publicly. I'm wondering, though, since the Trump administration has been in office for so long now, have they released to the Intelligence Committee their analysis of the 2024 election that President Trump won? What degree of foreign influence or interference was there?
We have not had it released.
Why?
have not the foggiest idea.
Okay.
Because literally the 2020 election, which was so much hubbub about, the president was briefed on January 7th, 2025. So, literally, actually, that was after the January 2021. There's no explanation. And if Donald Trump is suddenly interested in election security, why is he taking the cybersecurity agency, which did on a voluntary basis? Chris Krebs did a great job on that years earlier as a Trump appointee, and they basically completely downsized it. Why have they taken the voluntary programs like ERIC, where if you move from one state to another, making sure that dead people don't vote or people who have try to vote in 2 states, they've dismantled that. The Election Assistance Commission, not very well known, but this is the group that works with individual registrars in states, making sure their voting machines are safe. Trump recently fired the Democrats and made the Republican quit. Why is he doing all these things? I believe it's because Donald Trump intends to interfere in this year's elections. He knows if there is a free and fair election, his policies will be rejected at record levels.
What do you mean interfere?
Whether that takes, I think that what we just saw was this was the opening shot. The opening shot of trying to undermine Americans' confidence that their votes will be actually counted and mean something. I fear as well that if he tries to pull something that could potentially, he's not ruled out bringing ICE to the polls. He's not even ruled out the idea of trying to bar certain voting machines.
Well, we're going to talk about what is U.S. law in terms of the presence and how those election facilities are going to be run with our 2 experts next. Senator Warner, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. And for more on election security, we're joined now by CBS News contributors David Becker and Chris Krebs. Good to have you both here because I want to download from both of you what we should be understanding about this past week. Chris, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, appointed you to run the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, that's CISA, that Senator Warner was just talking about, to help states protect their election infrastructure during 2020. That was a secure election, you said. The president fired you for saying that. This past Thursday, he again insisted it was not secure. Did you hear anything that changes your assessment?
Not at all. In fact, I would say that it further bolsters my confidence in the security of the 2020 election between what has been released, disclosed last week, and all the information and the results of court challenges and other things in the intervening 6 years. 6 years. But it's also, I think, a good opportunity to reflect on the good work that the millions of hundreds of thousands, if not million or more, election workers that helped execute the 2020 election, the tens of thousands of federal government employees that worked to protect the 2020 election. That was not something that came together a couple weeks before 2020. That was years in the making. And that work was solid.
Secretary Mullins said Friday he'll have a plan within 30 days. We are 100 days out from the midterms.
Yeah, and in 2020, we had our CISA election security plan out in February of 2020.
So just to, before we move on to the current day, just to put a fine point on this for you, Chris. So during his first few months in office, the president issued executive order against you, saying you promoted the censorship of election information, and he claimed you dismissed election malfeasance and serious vulnerabilities with voting machines. In Intel speak, what you saw, interference would be hacking, changing some of the language the president used in those on-camera remarks. What you saw, how would you describe the Chinese role in the 2020 election?
Well, I think there was an honest debate and discussion across the intelligence community about what China's intent were. But ultimately, when it came out in the intelligence community assessment that was released in the spring of 2021, it was that China had a preference and that they were not in favor of President Trump, but their efforts were principally limited to influencing the American public, seeking to pay journalists, media, but it was an influence effort.
Journalist, if you're getting paid to tell a story.
That's fair.
That's my impact.
But it was an influence operation, and they have been doing that stuff since the mid-aughts, early 2000s. Yes. This is not net new. They did turn up the heat, and they are still doing it today. We have a significant and serious counterintelligence and counterespionage problem with China, and that's what I really want to see us talking about. What are they doing today? We have to put more emphasis on that.
Okay, here is exactly what President Trump said on Thursday about China.
They did not disclose to me as president or to anyone else, and to the best of our knowledge, they did not inform Congress. In fact, all they kept saying is, this is the most secure election in the history of our country, a standard, very pat line that was divvied out to say.
Was the president informed of what China was doing? You were in those rooms.
In January of 2020, there was a National Intelligence Community a memorandum about the 2020 election that talked about the vulnerabilities we saw in systems and the work we needed to do there. But it also talked about the intent of adversaries. Yes. And there were countless memos after that. So, a lot of these products were in senior executive and policymakers' binders, their intelligence binders, every single day. We use those to get out there and talk to the American people. I had an op-ed in September of 2020 to the general public that talked about various threat actors, including China. So I have a hard time believing that it didn't get up into the Oval.
Okay. Because China was described as attempting to influence, it was Iran and Russia, primary actors directly undermining the election in some of those 2020 statements. It sounds like you're saying he didn't read the memo.
Look, we could not have been more clear, is my view.
Or search the web.
Or search the web.
Right.
We did report on it on this network. I know, I remember. David, I want to go to you because the president said a lot of things. One of the other elements this week was what the Justice Department put forward. Harmeet Dillon there sent a letter to states saying any election official who knowingly retains non-citizens on voter registration lists or facilitates non-citizens in casting ballots will be held criminally liable. And then DHS Secretary Mullen described here the consequence of refusing to participate in their program. Take a listen.
If the election officials, once we gave them the information they need to secure their elections, and they chose not to, then those individuals can also be held accountable by fines, by penalties, and even, depending on how far it goes, prison time.
You speak to election officials. Are they concerned? That sounds like a threat.
Hardly a week goes by where someone in this administration doesn't threaten election officials with arrests. This week we had at least 2 prominent administration officials doing that. And it's become almost a running joke. They've been into this administration 18 months now. The total number of election officials who've been arrested for wrongdoing is 0. And that's appropriate because not only have they committed no crime, they've actually acted heroically and patriotically to support and facilitate our democracy through a pandemic and the aftermath with disinformation. What Secretary Mullen's talking about there, he's trying to pressure states to surrender sensitive voter data to the federal government. And the DOJ has filed over 30 lawsuits about that, and they are 0-16 in those lawsuits so far. He's threatening them with arrest for following the law. And so I think the election officials in the states feel very confident that they are following their state laws, they're following federal laws, they're doing everything they can to make sure this election is going to be safe, convenient, and secure.
We are 107 or so days out from November 3rd. What Secretary Mullen talked about as well is he said there's going to be a public plan in 30 days, stay tuned, but he wants them to use the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements program, the SAVE program, to screen for the citizenship of voters. How does that work? For people at home who may say, sure, there's a law that says non-citizens cannot vote in federal elections. They say, well, what's the problem with showing an ID?
So the SAVE system is a federal system that takes data from federal sources. It's currently in legal limbo because there's some challenges over whether it's legal or not. And from the limited federal data that it has, it can then match it in some cases to data that states may choose to share with it. The problem is that DHS admits that data is incomplete. They don't have all of the data. So a lot of the individuals that they might flag are actually citizens. They just don't have the documentation in the federal database to back that up. The states actually have far better data. The states are doing a really good job with this. And the reason they have better data is because when you go into a motor vehicles agency and you get a license, particularly a real ID, you have to show proof of legal presence. And that data, what you've shown, what you've documentarily shown to a government official, is kept in that database. And so you see election officials in states like Georgia, which is run by Republicans in states like Michigan, which are run by Democrats, and all across the country, able to do a better job of confirming that there are non-citizens on their voter lists than the federal government could ever do. And they've been in office for 18 months. And now they're talking about coming up with a plan in 30 days.
Right.
And in that 18 months, they've only charged 39 people throughout the entire country with voting as non-citizens.
Chris, we were checking for what election officials were saying after Thursday's revelations. Republican officials in West Virginia and in Utah say they have no outreach from the White House about direct election threats. They said, you got them, bring them. Utah said they actually want the election security resources to be restored and to have the federal government stop filing frivolous, again, this is a quote, lawsuits that consume our precious time and taxpayer resources. There are, 1,000 people who were cut from the agency you used to run. What should be happening to make sure that these officials have what they need? Because they said they do want some federal help.
Well, first off, exactly what Secretary Warner in West Virginia highlighted. If there is intelligence that needs to be shared with the states, get it to them. And typically, you share the intelligence with the affected parties prior to making a public announcement. So if there was something net new in the Thursday night address that needed to get out to election officials, that should have gone out Wednesday or Thursday morning. And as of Friday, it had not trickled down to West Virginia. In 2020, we conducted 33 classified briefings with election officials. 2020, 33. As far as I can tell, there have been no classified briefings with election officials since the beginning of this administration. So number one, we need to start the partnership and engagement with election officials, get them the intelligence they need. We need to recapitalize CISA, rehire CISA, stand up the Election Security Initiative. We need FBI task forces. We need the DNI mission centers all around election security. And we need to give them the funding and the resources they need to modernize their security systems and get the people out there that conduct these safe, convenient, and secure elections.
And David, what are you hearing from the officials you speak with? It is the states that administer the elections, but what kind of federal help do they even want?
Well, remember, and Chris alluded to this, in the first few months of this administration, they dismantled all of the work that the first Trump administration under the leadership of Chris had built and the Biden administration continued. It took a long time to build trust and credibility and expertise so that states would welcome federal assistance. That's not their normal status. And they built that up admirably. And starting in February of 2025, almost on day one, they dismantled all of it. And so all of those things that Chris was talking about that are so essential to push back on foreign influence campaigns, they're gone. On the bright side, and this is a pretty limited bright side, that happened early in the administration. So the states have been able to prepare for that. They have been working and networking amongst themselves to fill that gap. And at the end of the day, they have paper ballots. They audit those paper ballots to make sure that they're counted properly. They've hardened their systems, their voter registration databases. It's going to be a secure election.
Thank you, gentlemen, both of you. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We go now to the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul. Good morning to you, Governor.
Good morning.
You've got a big day, World Cup finals in nearby New Jersey. I know you'll be attending those. So will the President of the United States, the President of Mexico, the Canadian Prime Minister. Given the threat environment, are you confident in the security measures?
Absolutely. We've worked so close with our federal, state, and local partners in law enforcement. We have been preparing for this for literally over a year, over 1,000 exercises, table-topping all the scenarios. So we're with the best, and particularly with NYPD, the world's greatest police force. I feel very confident in our security. And we're so happy to welcome the eyes of the world. The entire planet is going to be watching what is happening right here in the New York City area. So it's exciting. It's a very exciting time for us.
Truly billions watching, and we will be too. Governor, I want to ask you about a decision that you made this past week that made very big headlines. You signed an executive order to ban large-scale data centers for a year. These are those big buildings that help to power artificial intelligence technology centers. It was just a few months ago you said data centers were a local decision for municipalities. What changed for you?
I would say what changed was talking to the localities and realizing they don't have the negotiating ability to, or have the clout to be able to demand that their communities benefit from this in a more dramatic way. They also don't have the ability to insist that these companies bring their own power or pay more for the grid. They don't have an ability to say no to tax breaks. And so I decided that I could do much more, especially in this, actually flooding the zone is what's happening now. We have over 30 applicants. So in a very short time, I changed my position saying, you know what, the state has to lead here, but it's not about being the first. It's about being the first to get it right. And we will get it right over the course of this year and help those localities negotiate the right way, make sure we're keeping track of how much water is being consumed, doing a study of that during this year, but also insisting that these companies, and they're welcome with the conditions and the rules that we set forth, that they also contribute to the larger grid, because this is a huge tax on our grid. And I want to make sure that the power is there, our limited power is there for the large companies that are creating jobs, like the Micron that we recruited here with 50,000 jobs. So we'll get the right balance, but I'll tell you this, people want protection. New Yorkers want protection. There's a lot of anxiety. Companies want certainty. We'll give them both.
Well, governors from red states like Missouri, Montana, Wyoming, they signed this White House Ratepayer Protection Pledge, which I guess has AI data centers sign on to promising not to increase consumer prices. Like companies, OpenAI and Amazon say they'll help cover the cost of infrastructure upgrades. Have you talked to these companies, about doing the same in New York? Why isn't a White House pledge like that sufficient?
Asking these companies to keep their word on how much they're going to consume. I'm more realistic than that, perhaps. I'm willing to say, I will get it right in New York. We'll work with the companies, but also, and we're open to AI, absolutely. This is a place for innovation is welcome and celebrated. But my view is, if you're going to succeed in New York because of our talent and our resources and our people, I want to make sure that New Yorkers succeed as well. So it's not a one-way street. I don't want the companies coming in and telling us how to do things in our state, but they can be welcome when I lay out the rules of the world of the road, which they will embrace. I mean, once they know how to play the game, how to do things in New York, they'll want to come, but I need some breathing room. So my agencies, I've got 7 agencies dedicated to different elements of this, the economic development benefits for communities, how we manage how much they're going to be consuming in water, how we make sure that, I mean, just to say, make sure the ratepayers don't pay more, how do you enforce that? I'm more realistic. I want to get things done and make it really be effective.
It sounds like you want evidence to help get you to yes, but in the meantime, you are hearing concerns from unions, for example, that this is going to turn away jobs and that it'll send a signal that New York is not a place for companies to invest long term. How do you address that?
That's not the right conclusion from what I've done. We've been very clear. And as someone who's created more union jobs in this state than anybody in history, the largest private sector development in American history is going on right now with this Micron. That is 20 years of union jobs building this. We also have tens of thousands of union jobs over years of building the Gateway Tunnel, which was stymied, stuck, not happening until I unstuck it. So I've got more jobs for union members. They don't have to worry about my commitment to their jobs, but wouldn't they be rather building jobs that there's jobs that remain after the construction season is over, that the project is built, that we actually have people, their neighbors, communities, people actually working in those buildings with long-term, good-paying jobs and not just focused on construction, which is very important. So I'm asking everybody to say, take a breath. This is not the end of the world. We'll get through this. And New York always leads in a smart way. And that's what I'm really proud of what we're doing here.
I want to ask you about election security. We're about 100 days out from Election Day. States administer the elections in this country, not the federal government. Are you getting the kind of election security resources your state has gotten in the last few years? Do you have what you need?
No, the federal government has basically been dismantling all the protections that we've come to rely on to protect this core essence of our democracy, the knowledge that when you cast that vote, that citizens' right, that obligation to determine who our leaders are, that it is uncompromised. It is not being challenged by the federal government just because they're so worried about the upcoming results. That is exactly what is happening. I want everyone to focus on that. Yes, we passed the John Rights Voting Act. We have the toughest protections in the country. And just recently, I signed a law, many protections against what ICE is doing, to say ICE agents cannot show up at polling places. Can you see this scenario? Black and brown communities across our country and in New York, where they're all of a sudden on election day to create that fear factor and intimidation factor that they're so good at. I do not want to see that compromise the validity of our election. So what Donald Trump is doing right now is throwing out the biggest red herring you'd ever see and questioning the actual results that are happening. So we're working hard on this, and I'll make sure that we are protected, but I can't count on the federal government for anything in this phase because they're compromised.
Under federal law, armed agents are not supposed to be at election centers. The Attorney General nominee, Todd Blanche, said he'd follow the law, but it sounds like you are still concerned that that might happen. Have you?
They don't follow the law very much at all, Margaret. They don't follow the law much at all. So again, trust but verify. I'm going to verify and ensure that New York State is doing it right. I don't trust that they're going to say this because what happens is they say the day after, like, oh, well, we didn't mean to do it, and oh, sorry about that. You know, these are people who go around killing individuals in our streets. So they have no credibility with me when they say anything.
We will speak to the White House about that topic shortly. Thank you very much, Governor. We'll be right back. We turn now to the economy. On Thursday, we spoke with Bank of America's CEO Brian Moynihan and asked him for an update.
Well, affordability is a challenge. It talked about challenge that we see in our customer base. But as you look at what's really going on, we see a couple things. One is the consumers, our 70 million consumers who spend about $400 billion plus a month, are spending about 5 or 6% more money this month of June of 26 versus 25, and likewise in the first part of July here. So they're spending money, and while the consumers reflect on higher gas prices or higher food prices and inflation and things like that, and are worried about it, what you see is especially the middle third of households and the top third of households by income, their spending is growing faster. What's been interesting, frankly, in the more recent past, in the last couple of months, is we're seeing the wage growth of all income cohorts kind of coalesce together around 3 to 4%, which is good.
So they're holding in there, even though we're seeing gas prices have raised the cost for drivers by 31% since this war with Iran began. I know fuel inventories remain low. How are you thinking about how this geopolitical uncertainty factors in to planning?
So the price of oil and gas affects not only the gas at the pump, which is what you're first reflecting on, and that is up. It actually started coming down, and as the oil prices rise, it might rise back up. But it basically, when we were running around $100 barrel equivalent oil, you were running about a $4 and change gas price. It actually had come down from the months of May to June because that's when the oil started flowing more. But I think if you talk to businesses, it's different. What consumers see is in a concerning nature that is out there. But when businesses see it, they worry about the cost of goods that's coming through the pipeline. So the goods are being manufactured now have imported that oil and gas to go into the plastics production or the material production or whatever it was. During the time when gas prices are high, and that's why our team has inflation staying higher all the way into 27, 28, and why the Federal Reserve will probably, our belief was will raise rates, whereas 6 months ago they thought the Fed would be cutting rates. They're actually believing they'll raise rates to fight off this inflation, and it will take them a while to get through it.
So raise rates, you think the Fed will act as soon as next week to do that? Or, excuse me, end of the month to do that?
I don't think more towards the end of the year. Our team has them raising rates, and I think based on the recent data that came out, they had 3 rate rises. Whether they hold that with some of the inflation numbers, but the reality is it's sort of the tail end of this year into next year, and it really will depend a lot on the path of other price cohorts other than just oil and gas at the pump, and that's the question of what's going on in housing and food and other places where you're seeing some continued progress being made. It's drifting down. And it's drifting down slower than people would like it. But the reality is this type of inflation takes a long time to squeeze out of the system. When you go back to the post-pandemic infusion of cash and infusion of activity, that just takes a while to squeeze out.
When we looked at Bank of America's earnings recently. You had record sales and trading revenue in the quarter past. A lot of that, some of it churn from energy price swings, but some of it seems from the tech boom of these massive AI companies and the public listings. How do you think about that, what looks like a tech boom?
It's absolutely a strong market for technology and other IPOs. There's biotech, there's biology, there's drugs going out, getting IPO'd and things like that. There's M&A activity. And so when you're talking about the investment banking activity of Bank of America was up 70% year over year or something like that, and our peers were up like amounts, and that has a lot to do at 50% actually. That has a lot to do with the amount of activity our corporate clients are doing, in part also comparing to last year, which was a Liberation Day quarter. The good news is at our company, the nominal dollars we earned in the first quarter and the second quarter went up in investment banking, and that's reflecting the environment around us.
Yeah, Jamie Dimon said it's getting close to as good as it gets. We just don't know how long it's going to last. I guess you're in that same camp. You don't know how long this is going to last.
That's always, yeah. That's the pipeline. We measure what we call pipeline. So what's the forward activity that haven't yet booked? In other words, the deals in process, yeah. and that activity is as strong as it's ever been.
Well, it's fascinating because Wall Street is benefiting from this IPO boom around AI. But it is the state of New York, where you are sitting right now, that has now become the first state to bar the construction of large-scale data centers. There's just so much political heat around this idea of not in my backyard. And the president argues this is all a driving force for jobs and a good thing. Do you see more states following suit?
This is a classic struggle of land use, and everybody's working it through, and everybody will work it through differently. Whether it's the stories about New York putting a pause on in terms of further development, while they try to figure out the dynamics of electricity pricing, water pricing, and things like that. There's other states that are saying, build it. Louisiana has a major facility going in. So I think we see it handled differently, but it really comes down to America being America. My community, my town hall, my town meeting, my mayor, my council deciding what they want to do, or my governor. And I think that's where the population is trying to figure it out. And so there's a pretty good tug of war going on, but I think the facts ought to get on the table, the decisions ought to follow what people want for their community, and then frankly the data center builders will go to the communities that want them.
So I know you've got a FIFA sign next to you, and the FIFA World Cup finals are this weekend. The world's going to be watching. You're a sponsor. Given how high ticket prices are to these matches, have you been surprised at the turnout at the tournaments and the spending?
Absolutely not. Our team did a research piece, Margaret, that said that the total amount that is economically generated on FIFA is about $40 billion, $20 billion would be in the U.S. And then even we look in the host cities like Kansas City, we can see the growth rate in spending faster than other cities. So it's having this on-the-ground economic impact. And that spending is going into what we call bricks and mortar. It's going to bars and restaurants and things like that, not necessarily only the people in the stadium. And so it's an unbelievable phenomenon I think the United States hadn't seen for a while, seeing again. And to put it in context, they're estimated 2 billion people will watch that the finals on Sunday, which is just an amazing amount. And that's what the brand strategy for us was. We had a great quarter internationally. We have a great international business. It's a very important part of what we do.
You can watch our full interview on our YouTube channel or on facethenation.com. We'll be right back. And we're back with President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan. Welcome back to Face the Nation.
Thanks for having me.
Mr. Homan, we saw that 2 immigrants were shot in the span of a week. There was that one in Maine that was fatal just days after, another one in Houston. We also saw that man fleeing agents in Florida who then was struck and killed by a tractor trailer. I know you've been trying to keep the department out of the headlines ever since that streak in Minnesota that was deadly. How do you respond to those who say what's happening now looks like very little has changed?
Well, first of all, we'll wait and see what the investigations, how they play out, right? Because, I don't want to get ahead investigations on who's at fault, what exactly happened. Because we all know when these investigations happen, there's going to be cell phone video, there may be city cameras, and of course then you got witness statements and affidavits from the officer and witnesses. So we got to let the investigations play out. So I don't want to really comment on investigations themselves, but I think Mark Wayne Mullen took some action and in concern of safety of the agents and how we do operations, and that's why he did that that pause on enforcement on vehicle stops. But my concern is I've done this since 1984. My concern is I think a lot of the rhetoric that you see every day, especially in sanctuary cities and at these protests that resist. Members of Congress saying ICE isn't a real law enforcement agency. I actually think that emboldens some people to say, I'm not going to comply with ICE. And I think no matter what people think of ICE, no matter what you think of immigration law, you should always comply with law enforcement.
Yes, but in the shootings in both Houston and Maine, the people who were killed were not the intended targets. Have you caught the people you were actually looking for?
One of them, I believe we did, but that happens in law enforcement all the time. I mean, we're working, we get leads on individuals, and you say, okay, well, this subject lives at this house, he drives this car. And when that subject leaves that house, 6 o'clock in the morning, and someone gets in that car from that house, they assume, okay, this is our guy, and they'll do a vehicle stop. And depending on when they make that stop and that person complies, either they're going to be arrested or released. That's the way it's supposed to be. So, law enforcement deals with misidentity every day across the country, not just ICE. Every law enforcement agency. I was a cop. I know that happens.
Yeah, but these were fatal shootings, of course, in Houston and in Maine. And in Houston, it was an unmarked car. So when you're saying don't resist, these individuals who were chasing the man who died, they didn't have markings on that vehicle that would allow for him to know that they were ICE. It just looked like a car coming after them in the videos.
No, they have emergency lights. Officers have insignia, so when they get out of that car and approach the car, you can clearly see the law enforcement officers.
Well, in the video that has been public, it's not a marked car.
These people, I'm not saying it's a marked car, but they have emergency lights and sirens, so when they pull somewhere, they're going to activate the emergency lights. A lot of police departments, I'm in New York City right now, a lot of NYPD officers are driving unmarked vehicles, and that helps them find people that don't want to be found, right? So, but bottom line is, we'll see when the investigation plays out, but they would be alive today if they simply complied with a vehicle stop by federal law enforcement. Just comply. You can, if you don't think you're being treated right and they had no reason to stop you, then there's avenues to take them to court, to sue.
Well, the family of the man in Houston said that he thought he was being robbed because it was an unmarked vehicle. Not that it was law enforcement at all.
They had emergency lights. They activate emergency lights, blue and light. In my vehicle I drive where I'm with my security detail.
You've seen that on video? Because we haven't.
Seen what on video, ma'am?
That there were lights? Because in the videos that we've seen, there aren't. And because there weren't body cameras, it is hard to substantiate some of what you were saying.
Okay, well, I have not seen the videos, but I'm saying our vehicles are equipped with emergency lights. Now, if they didn't activate the lights, again, I haven't seen that video. If they didn't activate the lights, then there's an issue there, right? But I'm saying they're equipped with lights. So let me just caveat that. They should have been equipped with lights and sirens, but I do not know specifically if they activated those lights. As far as the cameras, Margaret, everybody in ICE would have a camera now if the government wasn't shut down by Democratic members of Congress. There was money in that bill that they held up.
Yeah.
I think it was $120 million to equip all ICE officers with cameras, but because the government shut down, we're behind on that.
But they got $20 million in April.
That wasn't enough. The $20 million may have bought some cameras, but it doesn't buy the storage. It doesn't buy the resources we need for the thousands of FOIA requests we're going to get. There has to be storage capability to hold these videos for a long time. So it didn't fund everything, but now we have the funding after reconciliation. The cameras have been purchased. Right now they're training the trainer and deploying the cameras nationwide.
Do you think it was a mistake for the Trump administration to have proposed the body cam expansion at the beginning of the term? Because I know you have advocated for body cameras, and now you're playing catch up, right?
I think body cameras are the way to go. I think body cameras lets the American people know what that officer sees when he takes that action.
When will everyone get one?
You can have a cell phone camera from a witness on the side. You can have city cameras or whatever. But I want the American people to see what that officer sees when he makes when he makes the decision, takes an action.
Yeah.
I think the American people need to see what that officer sees and hears. I think it's important.
Yeah.
And if you look at the data, body cameras actually exonerate agents more than they, provide evidence of wrongdoing.
Well, yeah, and it would certainly help with reporting and public knowledge. Let me ask you about something else. The DHS secretary has said they went through public records and identified 250,000 non-citizens in 4 states, California, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Nevada. I know those states don't share their voter rolls, so it looks like they're just pulling this from public information. For those states, are you planning operations before November? And you do acknowledge that it would be illegal to have federal agents at election locations.
That's a question of DHS. I'm not in the loop on that. I'm not familiar with the information that DHS just released.
Okay.
I'm not in the loop on that. I'm at the White House of Borders Art, so that'd be a question for Mark Wayne Mullen. I'm not in the loop on that.
Okay. All right. Mr. Homan, thank you for your time this morning. We'll leave it there.
Good seeing you, Margaret.
We'll be back in a moment. That's it for us today. Thank you all for watching. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.